So, good afternoon. My name is Chanelle, and I was studying political science in the US. And obviously, huge cultural shock. One of the most shocking events I've been to is the tunnel of oppression. In the tunnel of oppression, there were rooms we had to walk through, and in each room, there were various scenarios of mental health related issues. And there would be people acting out a scenario based on mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, and the list goes on. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The way that they portrayed people with mental health issues was not what I pictured it to be. I imagined that they would be crying or screaming, but in reality, they look just like me. So I went home to do some reflection and I wondered to myself, why haven't I been to events like the Tunnel of Oppression in Malaysia? So this brings me to my topic today, and that is acknowledging mental health in Asian households. Now, does anyone here know what is commonly used in Mandarin when referring to a person who has mental health issues? Well, the translation is 精神疾病. And as a Mandarin speaker, I just found out that 精神疾病 is a more appropriate term when referring to a person with mental health issues. Because in a casual conversation, what we would normally say is 有病 or 神经病, which means the same, but it carries an entirely different energy. Now, there's no doubt that there are people who view mental health negatively. In fact, 40% of the survey report in India describe a person with mental illness as crazy, mad, or stupid. But this can be understood from our social stigma. Now, a stigma happens when a person defines someone based on their mental illness rather than who they are as an individual. So, for example, they might be labeled as psychotic rather than a person who is experiencing psychosis. So, in the example I showed was 神经病. We label the person as mentally unstable rather than a person who is experiencing mental health issues. So we know that social stigma can affect our perception on mental health. But I want you to think even further to nonverbal communication. Now, nonverbal communication is like body language, and there are different ways to use nonverbal communication. But I want to highlight on assenting nonverbal communication. This type of communication is used to alter the interpretation of verbal messages like words. So the example I showed was 神经病, but it can also be mental illness. Can you see the effect of the whisper and the facial expression? Because it can be mental illness or 神经病. Now, I'm sure you can tell the difference between those two because one carries a stigmatic belief and the other does not. And we might be able to find some answers as to why we carry such a negative connotation in our culture. Now, don't get me wrong, our culture is beautiful, and every country has their own culture, and the same goes to every ethnicity and even smaller communities like your friend circle. And we can see that through culture, we develop a sense of belonging, personal and cognitive growth, and the ability to empathize and relate to each other. According to a research by Kramer, the Asian culture has embedded the idea that seeking for mental health care is a shame. Now, this explains why mental health is not as valued in many Asian families. For example, in the traditional belief system, Vietnamese believe that depression equals sadness. Japanese believe that mental illness is not a real illness. Koreans believe that mental illness is a result of bad luck, and Chinese believe that it is caused by evil spirits. But bear in mind, those are just in a traditional belief system. Now, in a survey conducted in Malaysia, 38% of the respondents were concerned about embarrassment or social stigma as their reasons for not seeking professional help. That is incredible. Now, I want you to take a look around. You may not know what people are going through or what they're suffering from, And we might not be able to change our societal perspective on mental health, but you have the decision to encourage positivity and help people in your communities to understand the struggles of mental health illnesses. Because small changes can create a huge impact. Now, raise your hand if you think that parents play a part in that social stigma. Raise your hand if you have supportive parents who talk about mental health and are open about seeking medical help from a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Now, every household has a different set of traditional beliefs. And a research by the Western Journal of Medicine, some traditional belief systems include mental illnesses as a result caused by a lack of harmony of emotions or sometimes by evil spirits. My point is, if parents refuse to acknowledge that mental health issues is a psychological problem, it is often because they were taught to think that way when they were younger. Now, there's this famous phrase that I find quite interesting because it directly translates to "do not throw my face," or in other words, saving face. Now, saving face is the ability to preserve the public's appearance of an individual for the sake of the community's propriety, and most importantly, it is used to avoid humiliation. Now, if you're a Chinese or Asian, chances are you've heard of Confucius Teaching, or also known as 孔子. Now, Confucius Teaching represents part of our traditions, but it is also one of the traditions which actually discourages us to display our feelings in order to maintain a so-called harmonious relationship with others. But when we're put into a broader perspective, Stanford University studies found that Western culture tends to be more individualist, whereas Eastern culture tends to be more collective and focuses on fitting in. Now, we have to remember that there is no right or wrong in this. It is just how we were taught to be. But the real question is suppressing our emotions really for the better? Now, I want to share with you an experience I had as a child. So whenever my parents gave me life lesson, they would expect me not to cry. And if I did cry, the life lesson would turn into a physical lesson. Which is funny now that I think about it, because crying is our natural response whenever we're feeling hurt or sad. But why is it common for people to see emotions as a sign of weakness? We humans are born and made to feel more so than any other species on Earth, and yet we are expected by societal standards to not express any emotions, or just the positive ones. So why do some believe that emotions are a sign of weakness? And I think that the answer lies in stereotype. Now, emotions aren't a topic that are openly discussed in many Asian communities. Moreover, the traditional belief system has taught many that emotions should be controlled and hidden. However, did you know that emotional suppression and bottling up your feelings actually damages not only your mental health, but also your physical health? But I understand that often expressing your emotions is not an option because somehow they always have an easy solution to fix the problem. Let me give you an example. So you go up to your parents and you tell them that you're feeling a little sad and a little depressed. Their response? You own your phone too much. Or you should start sleeping earlier. Or you should drink more water. Now, what they fail to consider is the possible reasons behind these behaviors. You could have been stressed out, which makes sleeping so much harder. And there's so many possibilities out there, and yet at times, our parents seem to always have an easy solution for most of our problems. And after giving an easy solution comes another lecture. All right, putting the jokes aside. Though it is clearly stated in the Constitution of WHO that mental health is of equal importance as physical health, but mental health has yet to be prioritized in most Asian countries. And we can see that through the limited facilities and services available for mentally ill patients. Quick fun fact. Did you know that Asian patients are more likely to link their negative emotions to physical pain? I believe that the reason behind is that the knowledge concerning mental health that we currently possess is insufficient. Generation after generation, the mindset in which mental health is not real persists. Perhaps some grandparents turn a cold shoulder to some parents whenever they were trying to express something as complex as mental health problems, and thus some parents are doing the same. Who is to say that we don't do the same to our kids? This mindset is rooted in our subconscious. You're feeling down, just get some rest. I myself have said this multiple times before I acknowledge the fact that mental health should indeed be constantly reinforced. We need to know that mental health issues do not and will never mean that you will never have good days again. But how many of us recognize that? Tell me, if you are a child who grew up in a traditional Asian household, do you think that mental health is real? Or perhaps, when did you realize that mental health is important? Now, we're so obsessed with the idea of being yourself. Let's not talk about how many of us truly know who we are as a human. Let's talk about how many of us has put in effort to actually know ourselves. Sit down and give this a thought. What gives you satisfaction? What are your boundaries? How are you taking care of yourself? How are you feeling right at this moment? And no, don't shake it off with the I don't know or I don't care, life goes on either way this time. Why do we keep avoiding conversations with ourselves? We enjoy interaction. We crave people to understand us. We love the care that others give to us. But what about from you to yourself? From me to me? It is so easy to shut off your thoughts and hop on a call with your best friend to talk about some random tea you just picked up. But trust me, when I say that those little emotions you try to bury can build up one at a time. I'm not a psychologist. However, I believe that you can relate to a certain extent as I'm saying this. Some mornings, we just wake up with a negative stream of thoughts. And some days, those streams turn into rivers. Sound familiar? Well, face those streams as they are, and I hope that you're at least a little surprised of how accurately I describe the feeling. Now, when big feelings don't go away, then they can become mental health issues. Give your mental health priority for once and start letting loose when you need to. You see for yourself how much difference it makes. Start asking yourself if pushing yourself this one time will make a difference in the long run, or will letting yourself off the hook this time make a bigger difference. I never knew how much better I would have felt if I've just given myself a little bit more time to simply take a breather, lying on my couch, watching some Netflix whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed, help me come back stronger, way stronger. Because I've been in that stream and I've been in that river. And sometimes I do go back, but we have to embrace it because we might even find hidden treasures in those rivers. Now, my last question for you is, are you feeding into this culture? And are we part of the problem? Think of it this way. The stigma related to mental health is because of how we were taught to view it. But we should never be afraid of mental health. The prejudice we hold is towards the image or meaning of mental health that is rooted in our heads. One change will butterfly into another. If we change the negative meaning in our own hearts, we will change the meaning itself. And at the end of the day, there is nobody to blame. And there's no one to point a finger at because we are part of this. We are part of the decision on whether this stigma continues its cycle. Now, believing in mental health does not and will never mean abandoning our traditions. It is common to apply the usage of Western medicine in Asian countries, but does that indicate that we've lost our core value as Asians? No. But I understand because change sounds so overwhelming and it's complicated, but we can look at it step by step. And acknowledgement is the first step. I want to congratulate you here if you have acknowledged the fact that stigma exists in our very own household, community, or culture. Now, what can we do after this seemingly new mindset that hits us like a sack of bricks? Start talking. Yes, as simple as that. Be the one to initiate conversations with your parents and help them understand. You might not be able to convince them the first time or second time, but what is stopping you? What is stopping you from trying? State your thoughts and show that you care, show that you want the connection, and show your love. We want the butterfly effect to magically occur in our homes, but we need to bear in mind that every butterfly evolves from a cocoon. Break through the cocoon, then the butterfly effect would start. Thank you.